The rain fell in sheets that night, turning the neon-lit streets of downtown into a blur of red and blue reflections. Officer Daniel Ruiz had seen plenty during his 7 years on the force, but something about this shift felt different. The kind of different that settles in your chest before you understand why. It was just past midnight when the calls started coming in. There's a dog in the middle of 7th Avenue. Traffic's backing up near the Walgreens. Some puppy won't move. Someone needs to get this animal out of the road before it gets hit. Daniel pulled his patrol car around the corner, emergency lights painting the wet pavement in rhythmic pulses. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see the brake lights of at least a dozen cars, all stopped or crawling forward at a cautious pace. And there, in the center of the street, sat the smallest, soggiest puppy Daniel had ever seen. He wasn't running. He wasn't cowering. He wasn't trying to escape the cars that honked and swerved around him. He was just sitting there. Daniel parked at an angle, blocking traffic, and stepped out into the downpour. The cold hit him immediately, rain soaking through his uniform in seconds. He approached slowly, expecting the puppy to bolt at any moment. But the puppy didn't move. As Daniel got closer, he could see the matted fur clinging to the small frame. Maybe a terrier mix. Maybe 6 months old. Maybe less. The puppy's dark eyes locked onto Daniel's, and then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted one muddy paw into the air. Not in play, not in fear, in desperation. Daniel's heart twisted. He'd removed dozens of stray animals from roadways before. This was different. This puppy wasn't lost. He was asking for something. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said softly, crouching down despite the rain pooling around his knees. "What are you doing out here?" The puppy whimpered. Not the panicked cry of a frightened animal, but something else. Something that sounded almost like words he couldn't form. Daniel reached out his hand, and the puppy pressed his soaked body against it immediately, shivering, but trusting. For a moment, Daniel thought he'd just scoop the little guy up, take him to the shelter, and call it a night. But then the puppy did something strange. He pulled away, walked 3 steps toward the sidewalk, stopped, turned his head back toward Daniel, and waited. The rain hammered down. Cars honked. Someone shouted something from a window Daniel couldn't hear clearly, but all he could focus on was the puppy, standing there in the rain, looking at him with an intensity that didn't belong in such a small creature. "You want me to follow you?" Daniel asked aloud, feeling ridiculous. The puppy took 2 more steps, looked back again. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. In 7 years on the job, he'd learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct he had was screaming that something was very, very wrong. He glanced at his patrol car, at the traffic building up behind it, at the dry interior where he could radio this in and wait for animal control. The puppy whimpered again. Daniel made his decision. "All right, buddy," he said, standing up and following the small, limping figure toward the sidewalk. "Show me." The puppy's tail didn't wag. He simply turned and started moving more quickly now, glancing back every few seconds to make sure Daniel was still there. They left the main street behind. The neon signs faded. The sounds of traffic grew distant. And as they turned into a narrow alley behind a row of closed shops, Daniel's hand instinctively moved to his radio. The puppy wasn't lost. He was leading Daniel somewhere urgent, somewhere that couldn't wait another second. The alley swallowed them both in shadow, and the puppy broke into a desperate, limping run. The alley was darker than Daniel expected. The streetlights barely reached here, and what little illumination filtered through came from a single flickering bulb above a service door halfway down. The rain created a steady drumbeat on the metal dumpsters lining the walls, and the smell of wet garbage mixed with something else, something Daniel couldn't quite identify yet. The puppy moved with purpose despite his limp, his small paws splashing through puddles that seemed almost as deep as he was tall. Every few steps, he'd stop, turn his whole body around, and stare at Daniel with those impossibly expressive eyes. "Hurry. Please, hurry." That's what those eyes said. Daniel had seen fear in animals before, seen aggression, seen confusion. But this was something else entirely. This was urgency. "I'm coming, buddy. I'm right here," Daniel called out, his voice echoing off the brick walls. As they moved deeper into the alley, Daniel noticed details that made his chest tighten. The puppy's breathing was labored, each exhale visible in the cold air. His gait wasn't just a limp, it was exhaustion. How long had this little guy been out here? How far had he traveled? And more importantly, from what? The puppy suddenly veered left, squeezing behind a large commercial dumpster. Daniel had to turn sideways to follow, his equipment belt scraping against the metal. The space was cramped, dark, and the smell here was different. Not just garbage, but something organic. Something that made the hair on the back of Daniel's neck stand up. "Where are we going, buddy? What are you?" The puppy stopped, turned back one final time, and then pressed himself against something Daniel couldn't quite see in the shadows. Daniel pulled out his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife, and his breath caught in his throat. There, crumpled against the wall behind the dumpster, lay a woman. She was young, maybe 30, maybe younger. It was hard to tell. Her clothes were soaked through, plastered to her body. Her face was pale, lips tinged with blue. She wasn't moving. For a horrible second, Daniel thought they were too late. But then he saw her chest rise. Shallow. Too shallow. "Oh God," Daniel breathed, already reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 247. I need paramedics at the alley behind 1847 7th Avenue immediately. Unresponsive female, possible hypothermia, possible." The puppy's whimper cut through his report. Daniel looked down and felt something break inside his chest. The puppy had curled himself against the woman's body, pressing his small, soaked form against her chest, as if trying to warm her. His nose nudged her face, her neck, her cheek, gentle, insistent, desperate touches that said more than any words could. "Wake up. Please wake up. I brought help. Wake up. Dispatch, priority 1. I need that bus now," Daniel said, his voice cracking slightly as he knelt beside the woman. He checked her pulse. Weak, but present. Her skin was ice cold to the touch. How long had she been out here? The rain had been falling for hours. The temperature had dropped into the low 40s. Daniel shrugged off his jacket, his hands shaking as he draped it over her. The puppy didn't move from his position, didn't even acknowledge the jacket. He just kept nudging her face, kept whimpering that heartbreaking sound. "Where did you come from?" Daniel whispered, looking at the puppy. "How did you know to get help?" The puppy's dark eyes met his, and in that moment, Daniel understood something profound. This wasn't a stray who'd stumbled across an unconscious person. This wasn't coincidence. This puppy had left her, had run into traffic, had stopped cars, had begged for help, and then had led Daniel right back to her. "You're a brave little guy," Daniel said softly, his throat tight. "So brave." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Daniel could hear the heavy footsteps of his backup running down the alley, hear the dispatcher's voice on his radio requesting additional units. but all he could focus on was the puppy, still pressed against the woman's chest, still nudging her face, still refusing to give up on her. Even now, even after bringing help, the puppy wouldn't leave her side. The paramedics burst around the corner, equipment in hand, flashlights bouncing. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, establishing airways, calling out medical jargon that Daniel only half understood. But when they tried to move the woman, the puppy growled, not aggressive, not threatening, protective. "Hey, buddy, they're trying to help her," Daniel said gently, reaching down. The puppy looked at him, then at the paramedics, then back at the woman's face. One more nudge, one more whimper. "Please be okay. Please." Daniel carefully scooped up the puppy, feeling how cold and small he was, feeling the rapid heartbeat against his chest. The puppy struggled for just a moment, then seemed to collapse in Daniel's arms, watching as the paramedics lifted the woman onto a stretcher. "Is she going to make it?" Daniel asked one of the medics. The woman, Sarah, according to her badge, looked up briefly while adjusting an oxygen mask. "You found her just in time. Maybe 15, 20 minutes later." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. As they wheeled the stretcher toward the ambulance, the puppy began to shake in Daniel's arms. Not from cold this time, from grief. "I know, buddy," Daniel whispered, stroking the wet fur. "I know." Behind them, one of the backup officers called out, "Hey, Ruiz! Whose dog is this? Anyone know?" Daniel looked down at the puppy in his arms, at the small face pressed against his chest, at the exhausted body that had given everything it had to save someone. He didn't have an answer. Not yet. But something told him he was about to learn a story that would change everything. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital was quieter at 2 a.m. than Daniel expected. He sat in the waiting area, the puppy wrapped in a hospital blanket on his lap, both of them creating small puddles on the linoleum floor. The puppy hadn't made a sound since they'd arrived, just stared at the doors where they'd taken the woman, his small body tense with worry that seemed far too human. Daniel had called animal control twice. Both times, he'd hung up before completing the report. He didn't know why. Not yet. "Officer Ruiz?" Daniel looked up to see Sarah, the paramedic, approaching with a tablet and a tired smile. "She's stable, hypothermic, some early signs of frostbite on her extremities, but she's going to pull through." Sarah glanced down at the puppy. "That's because of you. And him. Do we know who she is?" Sarah nodded, scrolling through the tablet. EMTs found a phone in her pocket. Water damaged but still working. "Allison Chen, 28, lives about 8 blocks from where you found her. We've contacted her emergency contact. A sister who's on her way." 8 blocks, Daniel repeated quietly, looking down at the puppy. "That's a long way for a little guy like this." "The sister mentioned something strange when we called," Sarah continued, pulling up a chair. "She said Allison just adopted a puppy 3 weeks ago from the downtown shelter. Supposedly, he slipped out during the storm earlier tonight." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "This puppy?" "Has to be. The description matches. Terrier mix, brown and black, about 6 months old." Sarah reached out and gently scratched behind the puppy's ears. He didn't react, just kept staring at those doors. According to the sister, Allison ran after him when he escaped. She went out without her phone. Well, without thinking to grab it from her pocket. Without a jacket. Without telling anyone where she was going. "She was trying to find him," Daniel said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "For hours, apparently. The sister thought Allison was just at work late." Sarah's expression softened. "But here's what I can't figure out. If the puppy slipped out and ran away, why was he with her when she collapsed?" Daniel stroked the puppy's damp fur, feeling the small body trembling against him. Maybe he didn't run away. Maybe he got out accidentally and she chased him. But he came back, Sarah finished. Found her collapsed in that alley. They sat in silence for a moment, both looking at the puppy who'd saved his owner's life. "There's more to it," Daniel said quietly. "He didn't just stay with her. He left her." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "When I found him, he was 8 blocks away from that alley, in the middle of traffic, begging for help." Daniel's voice grew thick. "He left her side, left her alone and unconscious in the cold, to find someone who could save her. And then he led me right back to her." Sarah's eyes widened. That's not possible. Dogs don't." "I know what dogs do and don't do," Daniel interrupted gently. "And I'm telling you, this puppy made a choice. He knew she needed help. He knew he couldn't provide it. So he went to find someone who could." The doors to the treatment area swung open, and a doctor emerged, scanning the waiting room. "Is there an Officer Ruiz here?" Daniel stood carefully, the puppy still bundled in his arms. "That's me." The doctor, Drouch Patel, according to her badge, smiled wearily. "Ms. Chen is asking about her dog. She's very worried. I thought maybe—" She gestured to the puppy. "She's awake?" Daniel asked, relief flooding through him. "Awake and lucid. Incredibly lucky, considering. Would you like to bring him back? Just for a minute. I think it might help her." Daniel followed Dr. Patel through the doors, down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and fear, into a small room where Allison Chen lay propped up in a hospital bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, warming blankets piled on top of her. She looked young and fragile and terrified, until she saw the puppy. "Murphy," she breathed, and her face crumpled. The puppy's head snapped up at the sound of her voice. His whole body began to shake, and a sound came from him that Daniel had never heard before, something between a whimper and a cry and a word that almost sounded like Mom. "Can I?" Allison reached out with hands wrapped in bandages. Daniel moved to the bedside and carefully placed Murphy on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, neither the puppy nor the woman moved. They just looked at each other, both with tears streaming. Murphy's from his eyes, Allison's down her cheeks. Then Murphy very, very gently crawled forward and pressed his face against Allison's neck. And Allison wrapped her bandaged hands around him and sobbed. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry, baby. I couldn't find you. I looked everywhere. I couldn't find you." Murphy's tail wagged for the first time since Daniel had met him, a small, exhausted movement that said everything words couldn't. Daniel stepped back, giving them space, but Dr. Patel touched his arm. "Could we speak outside?" she asked quietly. Something in her tone made Daniel's chest tighten. He nodded, glancing back once at Allison and Murphy, at the reunion that should have been the happy ending, before following the doctor into the hallway. Dr. Patel closed the door gently behind them and pulled off her glasses, rubbing her eyes. "Ms. Chen is going to survive, but the exposure did more damage than we initially thought." "What kind of damage?" "She has early-stage frostbite on 3 fingers of her right hand, both feet, and significant nerve damage from prolonged hypothermia. She's going to need extensive physical therapy, possibly surgery." Dr. Patel met Daniel's eyes. "She's going to be in recovery for months, maybe longer." Daniel thought about Murphy, about how much energy it took to care for a puppy, about walks and play, and the constant attention they needed. "She won't be able to." "No," Dr. Patel confirmed softly. "At least not for the foreseeable future. Her sister mentioned that Allison lives alone, works full-time. There's no one to help care for the dog during her recovery. Through the door, Daniel could hear Allison's voice, soft and breaking, telling Murphy what a good boy he was, what a brave boy he was, telling him how much she loved him. Someone from animal control is on their way, Dr. Patel said. They'll take the puppy to the shelter until Ms. Chen recovers enough to— No! The word came out harder than Daniel intended. Dr. Patel blinked in surprise. No, Daniel repeated, softer this time. That puppy ran 8 blocks in a storm, stopped traffic, and led me back to save her life. He's not going to some shelter cage to wait for a recovery that might take a year. Officer Ruiz, how long before Ms. Chen is discharged? 3 days, maybe 4. Give me until then, Daniel said. Let me talk to her. Let me figure this out. Dr. Patel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But officer, she's going to have to say goodbye to him. After what happened tonight, after he saved her life, that goodbye is going to destroy her. Daniel looked through the small window in the door at Allison and Murphy, curled together on the hospital bed, both exhausted, both safe, both completely unaware that their time together was measured in days. I know, he said quietly. Sometimes love wasn't enough to keep 2 souls together. Sometimes survival meant separation. And sometimes the only way to save someone was to break both your hearts in the process. 3 days turned into 4, then 5. Daniel visited the hospital every evening after his shift, watching through the doorway as Allison held Murphy, as she whispered to him, as she tried to memorize every moment they had left. He never went inside. It felt like intruding on a goodbye that was still unfolding. On the 4th evening, Allison's sister, Jennifer, found him in the hallway. She knows, Jennifer said quietly, leaning against the wall beside him. She's known since day 2. Dr. Patel explained everything. Daniel nodded, unable to find words. She tried to convince herself she could do it anyway, Jennifer continued. Tried to plan how she'd manage with the crutches and the bandages and the nerve damage. She even made lists. Jennifer's voice cracked. She made lists of how to take care of a puppy when you can barely take care of yourself. Through the window, Murphy was curled in the crook of Allison's arm, both of them sleeping. She's going to give him up, Jennifer said. Not because she doesn't love him, because she does. When? Tomorrow. They're discharging her tomorrow afternoon. She'll go to my place to recover, and Murphy— Jennifer trailed off. She asked me to call the shelter where she adopted him. They said they'd take him back. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. The downtown shelter? The one on 10th? That's the one. Daniel knew that shelter. Overcrowded, underfunded, well-meaning, but overwhelmed. Murphy would go into a kennel with a concrete floor and fluorescent lights, would wait behind chain link for someone to choose him, would spend his days confused about where his person went. Can I see her? Daniel asked. Ms. Chen, can I talk to her? Jennifer studied him for a long moment. You're the officer who found her. I am. Murphy led you to her. He did. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. She talks about you, about how you followed him even though it didn't make sense, about how you must have thought you were crazy, following a puppy into an alley. She wiped her face. She says you and Murphy saved her life that night. Murphy saved her life, Daniel corrected. I just did what he asked me to do. Jennifer pushed off the wall and opened the door to Allison's room. Come on, I think you should meet properly. Inside, Allison was awake, her hand resting on Murphy's back as he slept. She looked better than she had 3 days ago, color in her cheeks, clarity in her eyes. But there was a grief there that made her look years older. Ms. Chen, Daniel said softly. I'm Officer Ruiz. We met briefly the other night. I remember, Allison said, her voice rough. I remember everything. I know what Murphy did. I know what you did. She looked down at the sleeping puppy. I know I owe you both everything. Daniel pulled a chair close to the bed. Ma'am, I need to ask you something. That night, how did Murphy get out? Allison's face crumpled slightly. The storm. There was thunder, and he was scared. I opened the door to bring in a package, and he just bolted. By the time I got my shoes on, he was gone. I ran after him, calling his name, searching everywhere. Her bandaged hand trembled on Murphy's fur. I searched for 3 hours, maybe 4. I don't remember when I started to feel cold. I just remember thinking I had to find him. I couldn't leave him out there alone. You collapsed in an alley 8 blocks from your apartment. I don't remember getting there, Allison admitted. I remember being so cold I couldn't feel my hands anymore. I remember sitting down for just a minute, just to rest. And then, she looked at Murphy. And then I woke up here, and they told me he saved me. He did more than that, Daniel said. He left you to find help, Ms. Chen. He ran 8 blocks back the way he came, stopped traffic, and begged me to follow him. Then he led me right back to you. Allison's tears fell silently. How did he know to do that? He's just a puppy, 6 months old. How did he know? I don't know, Daniel admitted, but he did. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound Murphy's soft breathing. They're coming to get him tomorrow, Allison finally said. The shelter. They'll take him back, and hopefully someone will adopt him quickly. Someone who can give him the life he deserves. Her voice broke. Someone who can actually take care of him. Ms. Chen, please don't, Allison interrupted, her eyes closing. Please don't tell me it'll be okay, or that I'm making the right choice, or that Murphy will understand. I know what I have to do. I know it's the best thing for him. But please don't tell me it doesn't break my heart into pieces. Daniel looked at Murphy, at the small puppy who'd run through a storm, who'd left his person to save her, who'd trusted a stranger in a uniform to be the hero when he couldn't be. He thought about his apartment, small, but with space for a dog bed. He thought about his irregular shifts, but also about his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd been asking to meet any dog he might bring home ever since she'd learned he was thinking about adopting. He thought about a puppy sitting in the rain, one paw raised, begging. Ms. Chen, Daniel said carefully. What if Murphy didn't have to go back to the shelter? Allison's eyes opened. What? What if I adopted him? What if he came home with me? You want to adopt Murphy? Allison looked confused, hopeful, terrified. But you don't know him. You've only met him once. He's a lot of work, and he's scared of thunder. And he needs someone who'll follow him when he asks for help. Daniel interrupted gently. Someone who'll listen when he's trying to say something important. Someone who understands what it means to protect the people you love. He reached out and carefully stroked Murphy's ear. I think I can do that. Allison stared at him, tears streaming. Why would you do this? Daniel thought about that question, about duty and compassion, and the moment when a puppy looked back at him in the rain and trusted him to follow. Because that night in the alley, Murphy trusted me to save someone he loved, Daniel said quietly. Now I'm asking you to trust me to take care of him, not as a replacement for you, but as someone who understands what an incredible little guy he is. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Daniel met her eyes. And I promise you, Ms. Chen, I will take care of him. I will love him. And when you're recovered, when you're back on your feet, You can visit him anytime you want. He doesn't have to lose you completely. He just needs a home while you heal." Murphy stirred in his sleep, pressing closer to Allison's side. "Can I think about it?" Allison whispered. "Can I have tonight?" "Of course," Daniel said, standing. "I'll come back tomorrow." But as he reached the door, Allison's voice stopped him. "Officer Ruiz, thank you for everything, for following him, for finding me, for this." Daniel nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. In the hallway, Jennifer was waiting. "You really want to adopt him?" "I really do." "Why?" Daniel thought about that question again, about all the answers he could give, but in the end, there was only one truth. "Because that puppy has more courage in his little body than most people have in their entire lives," Daniel said. "And someone like that deserves a home where he's safe, where he's loved, where he's understood." Jennifer smiled through her tears. "She's going to say yes, you know. She won't want to, but she will." "I know. Sometimes love wasn't enough to keep two souls together, but sometimes love meant letting go so everyone could survive. And sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was promise to protect what they loved most when they couldn't do it themselves." The paperwork took less time than Daniel expected. Allison signed the forms with bandaged hands, tears falling onto the pages, each signature a small piece of her heart breaking off. Murphy sat in Daniel's lap, confused but quiet, sensing something was happening that he couldn't quite understand. "You'll really let me visit?" Allison asked for the third time. "Whenever you want," Daniel promised. "I'll give you my number, my address. You can call first, or just show up. Whatever you need. And you'll tell me if he's not happy, if he misses me too much, if he—" "I will," Daniel said gently. "But Ms. Chen, I think he's going to be okay. He's brave. You know that better than anyone." Allison reached out and cupped Murphy's face, her bandaged hands shaking. "You saved me," she whispered to him. "You're the bravest, best boy in the whole world. And I love you so much." Her voice broke. "I love you so much." Murphy licked her bandaged palm, his tail wagging slowly, still not understanding that this was goodbye. "Be good for Officer Ruiz," Allison continued, her words tumbling out between sobs. "Be brave, be yourself, and remember that I loved you, that I'll always love you, that I'm not leaving you. I'm making sure you're safe until I can be the person you deserve." Daniel stood, Murphy secure in his arms. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Allison nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. "No, but it's time." Jennifer walked them to the hospital entrance, where Daniel's patrol car was parked. Murphy perked up at the sight of it, remembering that this car had brought him to his person before. "Thank you," Jennifer said to Daniel. "You didn't have to do this." "Yeah," Daniel said, looking down at Murphy. "I really did." The drive home was quiet. Murphy sat in the passenger seat, occasionally looking at Daniel, then at the window, then back at Daniel, as if trying to figure out this new arrangement. "It's okay, buddy," Daniel said softly. "You're safe. You're going home." Home was a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, ground floor with a small patio. Daniel had stopped at a pet store on the way and filled his trunk with supplies. Dog bed, food, toys, leash, collar. Murphy explored cautiously, sniffing every corner, occasionally sitting down with one paw raised and looking at Daniel as if asking a question. "She's okay," Daniel assured him each time. "Allison is okay. She's safe. You saved her, remember?" On the third day, Mrs. Patterson from next door knocked with a casserole and an armful of dog toys she'd been collecting. "I knew you'd bring someone home eventually," she said, beaming. "What's his name?" "Murphy." "Well, Murphy and I are going to be great friends," Mrs. Patterson declared. "I'm home all day, so anytime you need someone to check on him." "Actually," Daniel interrupted, "would you be willing to watch him when I'm on shift? I'll pay you, of course, and—" "Pay me?" Mrs. Patterson looked offended. "Officer Ruiz, it would be my honor to spend time with this brave boy, no payment necessary." The weeks passed. Murphy adjusted, slowly. He learned the apartment, learned the routine, learned that Daniel always came home. But every time the door opened, Murphy would look up, hopefully, as if expecting someone else. Daniel kept his promise. Once a week, he'd text Allison, sending pictures, sharing stories. And once a month, she'd visit, still on crutches, but improving. Her hands still bandaged, but healing. Each visit, Murphy would go wild with joy, pressing against her, licking her face, his whole body shaking with happiness. And each time she had to leave, he'd sit by the door for hours, one paw raised, waiting. "He still misses you," Daniel told Allison after her third visit. "I still miss him," she admitted. "But he's happy here. I can see that. He's safe and loved and—" She looked at Daniel. "You were right. He didn't lose me. He just found someone else to protect." 4 months after that night in the rain, Daniel came home from a particularly long shift to find Murphy waiting by the door, tail wagging, not sitting with his paw raised, just waiting. Happy. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, kneeling down. Murphy bounded over, licking his face, his whole body wiggling with joy. Not the desperate joy of reunion after trauma, just the simple joy of being home with someone who loved him. That night, Murphy curled up on the dog bed next to Daniel's couch, let out a long, contented sigh, and fell asleep without once looking at the door. Daniel pulled out his phone and texted Allison. "He's really settling in. Didn't wait by the door tonight. Just came right over. I think he knows this is home now." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for giving him that. For giving both of us that." Daniel looked at Murphy, sleeping peacefully, no longer waiting for rescue, no longer searching for someone lost in a storm. He thought about that night in the rain, about a puppy who wouldn't move, about the moment when everything changed because a small creature decided to trust a stranger. "Who saved who?" Daniel whispered into the quiet apartment. Murphy's paw twitched in his sleep, still lifting, even in dreams, but his face was peaceful now. The rain still fell some nights. Thunder still cracked across the sky. But Murphy didn't run anymore. He'd already found everyone he needed to save, and in saving them, he'd saved himself.